Okay. Good morning, Ted. Good morning, everyone. I am late. Numerous challenges. I'm fighting two bugs with the the global streaming network of my global broadcasting studio, neither of which is under my control. So I am coping, and let's see where we're at. It is episode 145, November 15th. Good morning. And I have yet another cold. Compliments of my younger daughter. This one took me out yesterday. I am coping, hence part of my lateness. Let's hope coffee helps. So send a question, comment, Twitter, YouTube, Twitch. This is a substitute image. There was a much better one I had. I can't find it. I just went live. So if you're tired, do it tired. It was a meme of an image, much cooler, but maybe I'll find it for a future reference because certainly this won't be the first time. Okay, so we're doing it tired. Here we go. The weekend. I can't even remember what I did last weekend. Something. And I did write down one of the questions I had, which will be later in the Q&A. Is it possible to scale capacity without a corresponding increase in complexity? That is the question of the week. And it takes many forms, depends on what you're trying to do and the type of your business, the type of scaling challenges you have. It is not trivial, and I think people underestimate it greatly. So that is the thing to ponder during the week. Okay, as I am late, we're going to jam. We, the collective we, my developer rewrote our internal application. That went much faster than I thought. He basically did a full V2, same project, but all of the methods went to V2. Pretty much have a V2 of everything. All the internal objects, all the methods, code units, procedures, classes, Azure function endpoints, whatever. And it seems to have gone well, and it is going to accommodate the requirement that I messed up and didn't really properly anticipate. And also talking with Tanya, the requirement was around handling multiple environments in a customer's tenant. And back when we wrote this application, we believe it was not possible to have two production environments in a BC tenant, if I recall correctly. I believe that was added later. So now you can have two production environments in the same Business Central tenant. So just coincidentally, we do need to deal with this now. So anyway, that was my kind of weak excuse, but it didn't really matter. We need to handle sandboxes. We need to handle production tenants or production environments. So that is done. We're going to start testing, and it is tricky because I'll mention later, we're having to test this in conjunction with an AppSource app. It's a library app that works with our AppSource apps, so it is tricky to test that. Significant changes. We are doing application insights training in Berlin, El Salvador. David's leading that up, and that is part of ERP Center of Excellence training. And Ronald's continuing to work on Power Automate Business Central Flow, and that has thrown some interesting curveballs at us there. So it has been a busy week. A couple people have been on vacation. Tanya's traveling. Jocelyn and Ronald are traveling. So a little bit of a slower week, but still a lot going on. And regarding complexity, Ted says, as long as you're willing to pay someone to take care of the complexity. That is one option, yes. Often when you scale and complexity increases, you have to pay for things. You have to pay for tools. You have to pay for services. You have to pay for employees. You have to pay for systems. You have to pay for help. Like if I do my personal taxes, maybe I can handle that. But if I have a more complex business structure, corporate structure, more complex tax scenarios, maybe I need to pay someone for that because I just don't have the competence. That's one, that's my limitation. Maybe you just don't have enough time in the day. You got to pay someone to do that for you. And just paying someone doesn't solve the complexity issues. Ted and I have joked about the challenges of relying on people for cybersecurity. I just had a call with a vendor about my firewall, and she's like, wait, what is your requirement? And I'm like, you're the CSSP. You should understand this requirement better than I. So she's like, well, we have this solution. Maybe that'll help. But maybe it'll help. Maybe it'll just increase the complexity of my IT infrastructure, and it's just going to cause more headaches. Good morning, Christian. Guten Tag. Cheers. But yes, and one of the challenges that we ran into while Monday. We've already arrived at Lunes, Monday. I had a call with a customer, Dynamics GP 18.7. If you're familiar with Dynamics GP, that is a new release that came out a couple weeks ago. So we have upgraded our ISV solution that I sell and support to support 18.7. So we have that new release, tested it, and we are rolling that out to 18.7 customers. I have hundreds of Dynamics GP customers that I still support, so the fun continues there. We did a Business Central demo call with a GP partner. That GP partner says, hey, I've got all these customers. They're starting to ask, what do I do? They're fine on GP, but they just want to start planning and understanding what their options are. So that Dynamics GP partner did a great job being very responsible. They're starting to investigate options so that they can help guide their customers. They want to take care of their GP customers, so if that customer wants to migrate off a GP in a year or 5 years or in 10 years, they will have options ready. So we gave that partner a demo of Business Central, Tanya and I, and we showed them its features and the typical things like, well, we saw BC a few years ago, but our impression was that it was half-baked, that it wasn't ready, didn't have functionality. And we've heard that many, many times, Tanya and I. Very common refrain among people who either are, say, GP partners who don't want to deal with BC, people who don't like BC for whatever reason or think they don't like it. People are very entrenched in the on-prem world. They have all of these stories about BC. And when we showed this partner BC, they realized what it could do. And they said, whoa, that is very different than what I thought it was. For good reason, right? The capability of BC is pretty incredible. Just the smallest things. A list page in BC compared to GP destroys GP. Dynamics GP had smart lists. Business Central standard list page, especially now with analysis view, plus send to open in Excel, edit in Excel, send to Teams, copy, all of that stuff, filtering. It just absolutely crushes the standard Dynamics GP functionality. So, the functionality of Business Central is phenomenal in many respects. Is it perfect? No. Does it have some things that, does it lack certain features? Maybe. Does it have some quirks and issues that, you got to work around? Absolutely. Just like every other ERP application, there's always pros and cons and trade-offs. Ronald and I were doing some digging on integrating Power Automate with Business Central. And I touched on this last week or the week before, I can't remember. And thank you, Jeremy Viska, for the heads up on the architecture behind the BC API document status field. Come on, man. Like, not a good implementation. I understand the desire to do this. Not a good implementation. If you're familiar with the BC sales order or purchase, sales invoice, purchase invoice status fields that get exposed via API, like draft, no, bad implementation. So now we're stuck trying to figure out how can we tell if a purchase invoice is in open status or release status. The status field cannot be accessed through the standard BC API. I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. So I kind of understand the rationale behind the API status. The implementation, I'm sorry, like thumbs down. And copying environments with dev extensions, that's part of the rewrite that we did of our internal app. In order to test that, it's a fun ride because it's an app source app. The scenario we need is we need to install our app source app. We need to copy, say, a production environment to a sandbox, and then we need to test both of those environments to ensure that both are working properly with our app. It is a teeny bit challenging to do with an app source app. We can do a dev deployment to production. We can copy to sandbox, but guess what happens? Many of you know. When you copy a environment with dev installed extensions, they get uninstalled. And we're like, what happened to our extension? Then we found this. We said, okay, it got uninstalled. Fine. Then we looked for our tables. They're gone. Even though this note says any data created in the original environment by the extensions are now uninstalled, the data will not be deleted in that copied environment. But we couldn't find our tables. Like, yes, I know you guys are saying, duh, Steve, it's pretty obvious what happened. Like in the moments we were trying to troubleshoot this, it didn't occur to me or my developer, like, our table is gone. We can't see it. Well, thank you, Amel, for the note on Twitter. This is the 24-hour global support desk called Twitter, Global BC Support Desk. I posted it. Within 30 minutes, Amel replied and said, oh, you need to deploy the extension again in order to see your data. And it took me a few minutes to understand what he was saying there, but we incremented the version of our extension, we redeployed to the sandbox as a dev deployment, and then the table showed up, which kind of makes sense now that we think about it. But anyway, if that didn't make sense, it's okay. The devs, I assume the BC devs know what I mean. So once your extension gets uninstalled in a sandbox, you need to reinstall that extension or incremented extension in order to even see your table. So that was a lesson. We just never encountered that before, so we never thought to understand that scenario. And speaking of the GP to BC partner world, customers, and what the plans are, Microsoft is hosting office hours webinars for GP partners who are looking to understand the functionality of Business Central, whether they're looking to migrate their practice or transition their practice eventually over to Business Central, or whether they're just going to stay with GP and you know many of the partners are retiring or just going to write it out for the next 5 to 10 years. This is a very timely. I saw this the day that we had the call with the partner on Monday. And so here are 6 webinars that Microsoft is putting on for GP partners exploring Business Central. And I assume this will dispel many of the just massive misconceptions and myths that many people who don't know BC have about Business Central. So there you go, November 12th through December 18th. Wow, November 12th is already gone. Hopefully these are being recorded. November 19th is the next one. 8 a.m. Pacific time on all of these dates. So check those out. Tuesday, martes, more AL programming calls with Franklin. I did another demo with a new Dynamic GP customer looking to purchase my ISV solution. So GP customers are continuing to invest. And even if it's just, I had a call with a customer, they're only looking for 1 year. They're like, yeah, we expect to transition off a GP in 1 to 2 years, but we still want to improve our Dynamics GP solution today. So that was what that call was about. And then I listened in on 3 hours of customer BC training that Tanya conducted with a new customer. So it was me and Jocelyn and Vanya on the call to just observe the training and build our training so that we have more people who can conduct that BC basic training, such as navigation, financial, and financial reporting. And it was the questions we had were interesting. It was not so much on the content, it was more on the delivery. How much time do you allocate for this initial training? Do you just do more of an initial run through, like a demo, and then have subsequent detailed hands-on training? Or do you set up detailed hands-on training from the beginning? And rather than 1 hour, maybe you have a 2-hour session for navigation and have the users do hands-on navigation. So those are the things that we were discussing after that training session. And in case you did not know, our very own BC Docs librarian, Natalie, is a co-author of the new 7th edition of Programming Microsoft Dynamics 365 Business Central book, published by Pact Publishing. And there were some initial issues buying and accessing the book on the website. Those have been fixed. I was able to purchase my copy of the book, the electronic copy, and download it. I also have a Pact subscription that is becoming very expensive. But anyway, it is a great book. Check it out if you are new to BCAL development, or if you're kind of a beginner, or even if you want to reference as an expert. Check it out. It's several hundred pages of content. And wouldn't you know it, coincidentally, there is a 30% discount on the ebook version. So head on over to Carillac Natalie's Twitter profile there, and she has a link to the book, or you just go to pactpub.com and search for Carillac, our own Docs librarian. Check it out and grab that discount while it lasts. I do not know how long that discount will last. So grab it now, like 30% free money. Check it out. Or if you're one of the few people who has a subscription, you can download it with one of your credits. Or if you don't have credits, I think it's a $5 to purchase the ebook version. Okay. And then on Wednesday, miércoles, I had a call with Franklin, and the lesson was for him to add a lookup field. So he's done a extension. It has a custom page, both a list page, card page, table. And so he's got his extension working. And the lesson was to add a lookup field. So we looked through different fields and we found the country code. And we thought that would be a good example to follow from BC. So how do you implement a country code lookup field on a custom page? So he looked into that and learned some interesting stuff. I was trying to grab a code sample from Stefan's BC Code History repository, but I couldn't find the example. And help me out, folks who are watching, AL devs, what do you call the lookup field? Is it just a different type of flow field? Because we saw the code, it actually said lookup parentheses, and we saw how it was doing the lookup and what value it returned. But then when I looked in Natalie's book, we didn't find an example of a lookup field. The word lookup was mentioned, but like it kind of pointed towards or inferred that was basically a variant of a flow field. So is that the case? What's the terminology for, say, the lookup country code field? Do you just call it a flow field, or do you call it a lookup? I don't know. Help me out here. Ted says it is a standard field with a table relationship. Okay, and that is where the lookup method or procedure is called. Is that accurate? Brad says table relation. Okay, cool. Muchas gracias, señores. Folks, thank you. Okay, awesome. So I will let him know where that is, what he is learning at the moment. And we saw a very interesting implementation of not the country code on the customer card. That one, interestingly, you choose the country and it pops in the country code. I believe that is what we were looking at. But what was more interesting was on the country code implementation, I forget what it was. It had both the code and the name, and you could display just the name of the country instead of the code. So we are discussing usability for the user. What's the user experience when you're doing a lookup? Do you want to display the code, or do you want to display, say, the country name? And so Franklin actually noticed that difference between the customer card and like the country page. And so he's doing great. He's doing awesome, making great progress, and he's noticing all these details. And so he's going to try different implementations to see if he can display the code and the name at the same time, or if it has to be one or the other. What are the options? Do we need to do a static read-only text field to display the name? I don't know. We're going to explore that. So, yeah. Oh, and Ted says it changes the address formatting. Huh. Who knew? Okay. And on Thursday, Jueves, I had the honor of talking to these prestigious gentlemen, the kings of the podcasting world. You may know them as Brad and Chris of the Dynamics Corner podcast. And you will notice that my IEMs were not working. I learned because it helps when you're charging a device if you actually plug in the other end of the cable. That's what I learned. So I was wondering, why don't my IEMs work, my in-ear monitors? Well, they were plugged in. They just weren't plugged in to be charging. So that was fascinating. So I had the big old headphones out. One moment, let me respond to the team. I'm live update doing podcast will be late. Okay. Okay. Sorry about that. So that's why I have my Monster Princess Leia headphones on. And yeah. So anyway, I kind of did look cool with the microphone and the headphones. I looked like a real podcaster, not a fake podcaster. And when will that podcast be out, Ted? I do not know. That is up to the podcast, the professional podcasters. I do not know what their timing is on that. And I was apparently starting to get the cold, so my apologies if I am incoherent during that. I barely remember what we talked about. And then after that call, I just went downhill last night and I was out cold. So, let's see. I don't stream this a big screen in Berlin. Yeah, I think they have better things to do in Berlin than watch me. Oh, Brad says it should be out Tuesday. Awesome. Very cool. So now, new BC features. Everyone gets excited about new BC features. 2025 Wave 1, 2024 Wave 2, blah, blah, blah. Like I used to follow that. I can't keep up. I can't even keep up with the new release videos that Microsoft Business Central team is now publishing to YouTube. And everyone gets excited. They talk about it. It's like, wow, all those new features. You get blog posts, you get videos, you get people hyping up the new release. My customers are just trying to use BC. They're just trying to deal with the bugs in the last minor release. I'd honestly rather have fewer bugs than 10 more features, just to be totally frank with you, if you know what I mean. I'd rather not have those support tickets. So my customers, I would say, in general, are just trying to keep up with their business, just trying to use standard functionality. And what's funny is regularly on calls, Tanya and I are talking about features, doing a demo, talking with a new customer. And we mentioned this feature and Tanya's like, yeah, that's a relatively new feature. And then it turns out it's been out for 2 years, but we still consider it new because we only have 0 to 2 customers using this new feature. So I stopped chasing new features. Like Folks, that's great that some AI agent blah, blah, blah is going to start taking your orders. Sorry, I'm not going to spend 5 minutes on that because my customer can't even enter their cash receipts because of just some crazy bug that is resulting in totally random numbers being posted in Business Central. Like, no, AI, way down the road, folks. Maybe in 5 years, I'll start looking at the Copilot features. I just want the product to work and have reduced support tickets. Anyway, the reason I mention this is because that Tanya asked this on Twitter. And she's like, hey, who has started using Excel for refreshable report layouts? Does anyone remember this? This was the big deal a couple releases ago. This new, very cool, admittedly cool feature where you would have Excel refreshable reports. I haven't thought about this since it was released. And I don't understand half the words she says here. Excel refreshable report layouts calling APIs using aggregated metadata. Gesundheit. I'm not sure what that is. I recall what the refreshable reports are. I do not understand what the APIs using the aggregated metadata means. Hopefully she's not the only one doing that. I feel that you might be, Tanya. I'm sorry, but keep us posted. So if anyone else has used these and actually implemented them for a customer, let me know, let her know, respond to her on Twitter, because it's probably a great feature, but out of the 100 features that were released whenever that was, there are then 100 after that, and there's 100 that just got released with whatever wave just got released. I cannot keep up. So anyway, moving on to Friday Viernes, obviously, cheers. I'm out of coffee. And on the new features, Christian says, Copilot features are only available in USA Sandbox, only available 1 year from now in Germany. Hard to bring customers in 1 year when new features are also coming. Yeah, so that's the other thing. It's like people get excited about new features. They get announced, but they don't all get released in that wave. And so if you look at the release, the new features schedule on the Microsoft BC page, it will say not yet released. And then they dribble out the features in the minor releases over 6 months. I haven't kept up to see if all of them do get released within 6 months or whether some get delayed. But yes, so that's another reason I just can't keep up with the new features. I would be fine if they stopped with the wave 1, wave 2. Like annual releases, cut the feature set down. I understand there's probably competitive pressure, but the pace is just insane. So on the scaling and complexity question that I mentioned earlier, as I mentioned last week, I have gone down the YouTube farming algorithm. It is truly bizarre. I've been binge watching this channel, and what has been fascinating is to watch his videos over the last 2 to 3 years and what has changed. And primarily the equipment he's replaced, the upgrades he's done, his capacity increase, and you can just see that he had this old machine 2 to 3 years ago. It had certain capacity. They had quite a few issues. So he's constantly fighting these quirks and issues with the I recall one about the seed machine. So the planter is dropping these seeds. He's having all sorts of issues with the reliability of those seeds going in at the particular intervals, some too many seeds, some too few seeds, all sorts of problems. But in his new version, he has all sorts of additional telemetry coming out of the machine, massive reliability improvements, and it has allowed him to complete his planting operation more acreage, much faster, smaller period of time, in between storms. Really interesting to see him scale up, but he had to buy a new $1 million piece of equipment to do that. And now he has a larger grain dryer. Now he has new grain silos that just happened to be destroyed during a tornado. But during that process, as he replaces things, he upgrades everything. So it has been fascinating. And yeah, Ted says, binge watching a farm channel, but no time for a BC launch channel. Huh. Hey, I have my priorities, right? And at 8 o'clock at night when I'm tired, I just do not have the mental capacity to watch a BC launch video. And if you've watched any of those launch videos, like 5 minutes into it, I'm like, wait, what? I tried, and even I have a hard time understanding what half of that functionality is. They're pretty intense. So anyway, it has been interesting to watch him scale, and at every step he runs into some type of limitation, whether it's capacity, manpower, machine, geography of his fields, technology, some type of glitch, something breaks, whatever it is, whether there's always a limitation there. So it is very interesting. But as he scales, he appears to have dramatically increased efficiency with his new equipment and technology. Like he is just hammering out his crop. So he seems to be doing it very well. So it's really interesting to see him manage that. And I guess the question is, how does this relate to us? So as I am building the team, as I am working with the team in El Salvador, I'm having to manage that team. We're figuring out how to train. So everything we do to grow, I tell the Berlin team, you need to manage it. You need to train. Every topic they learn, there is a training curriculum, and they have to train everyone else. And that's just the rule. So this morning from 7 to 9 my time, 9 to 11 their time, they were doing training. From Panama, from El Salvador, they're currently distributed. They are doing training. So that has helped us scale. But your organization, you need to figure out, how you're going to scale and deal with that complexity. Jocelyn published the AAR. I'll probably do a separate discussion of that. It was fascinating. And Jocelyn and I put a little Easter egg in the document, and we know that no one read the document. So I sent it out, and I had her put an Easter egg in there, and no one said a thing. So that was fascinating to see that even with our own team, we're all busy, everyone's traveling, doing their own thing, sending out the document. It's like, okay, that's great, Steve. But she and I know that it wasn't read. Otherwise, we would have had a comment as to the Easter egg that we included in the document. And if you're familiar with the story of, I forget what band it was, there was a large band that toured, and I don't know if it's a true story or not, but the claim was that in the contract, like 15 pages in, there was a requirement for a bowl of M&Ms all of the same color. And if they showed up and in their break room they had that bowl of M&Ms, they know the contract was read. Otherwise, they know the contract was not read completely, or at least not all the terms were met. So similar clause was put into our after action review. David is continuing on BC App Insights, Power Automate, BC API. Ronald, we still don't have a solution for finding out the status of a purchase invoice, an unposted purchase invoice. So I don't know if we need to do a custom API for that, in which case Franklin gets to do a custom API. I mentioned Franklin is really cranking on his AL Dev Learning. And we have an offer to a new Berliner to the BC Center of Excellence, Joel. He is going to be working with us on our internal secret projects. So he is going to be doing all sorts of crazy stuff, and BC, telemetry, help desk, internal projects, IT, infrastructure, helping us scale and deal with the complexity. So we were trying to figure out who would do that. Well, Joel is now the person who is going to do that. He is 18 years old, and he is unbelievably smart. So watch out. He's on it. Okay, excellence update. That was just this slide. News in El Salvador is that I don't know if this is a Guinness World Record, but they created what I think was the world's largest pupusa. And that is a big honkin' pupusa. That is at least like 10 feet wide. And so that was pretty cool to see. I don't know that I want to try it. I would love to be there and see it, but I never know how the world's largest foods cook and whether that's a good thing to taste. But it looked like quite a party, several thousand people there. So that was pretty awesome to see the world's largest pupusa being cooked in El Salvador. And Brad says, the band you're thinking of is Van Halen, and they famously included a clause in their contracts required a bowl of M&Ms with all the brown ones removed. It was actually a way for the band to ensure the promoters had read the contract thoroughly. If they found brown M&Ms, it was a sign that more critical technical and safety requirements might have been overlooked. Exactly. So if they're not reading paragraph 75, what other paragraphs are they not reading? Or if they read it but didn't comply, what else did they miss? Did they miss the pyrotechnic safety requirements, right? The fire requirements, the ambulance requirement, who knows, right? So thank you, Mr. Copilot. Yes, exactly. That's what it's good for, these trivial things, right? So cybersecurity, question mark. You might have heard of this, and I think it was a little blown out of proportion, but it tells you that cybersecurity is hard. And this went around, and the initial email that went to customers over on the left there, the issue was that if you had a username with 52 characters or more, it would allow an attacker to bypass the login completely and not even have to supply a password, because their authentication mechanism had some type of bizarre bug that said, oh, this user already has a token in place. For whatever reason, the 52 character more username allowed it to just step past the authentication requirement. And everyone was mocking Okta for this. If you look at the actual conditions for this bug, it's unlikely to be exploited widely because most usernames will not be 52 characters. So in theory, the risk is probably relatively small, but the fact that this existed, they got absolutely roasted because this is a security and authentication provider. So cybersecurity is hard. And speaking of which, post-quantum crypto, I had another thing about BC. I think it's coming up. NIST has published their internal report called the NIST IR 8547 IPD. This is very exciting reading, folks. So yes, I am reading this instead of following up on new BC features. And this paper is a draft of the Transition to Post-Quantum Cryptography Standards initial public draft, available free of charge. I'm not going to recite that URL, but there is a QR code in the upper right corner there. And what is notable in this paper is that the RSA algorithm, they are recommending deprecating it after 2030 and disallowing its use after 2035. So if you do asymmetric cryptography, public key cryptography at all, and if you're using ECDSA, EDDSA, or RSA, you will need to I would plan on stop using them by 2030. And you'll say, 2030, that's only 6 years away. Imagine the infrastructure that needs to be upgraded to move away from public key cryptography implementations. And I believe ECDSA is elliptic curve, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not really into elliptic curve. It's kind of after my study of encryption. And these are quantum vulnerable digital signature algorithms. So 2030, folks, I was just talking to someone about RSA implementation required by some type of ISV solution. And so when transmitting data with that ISV solution, they were apparently requiring RSA encryption. So heads up, this does affect the BC world. And notably, symmetric cryptography is noted in this paper to be significantly less vulnerable to known quantum attacks. So Jason says, not for me, I'm too busy trying to learn new BC features. Yeah, like pick your battles, right? So I was surprised to see that symmetric cryptography is apparently not a concern at this time for a quantum attack. So just due to the algorithm, sorry, the gardener's here and it is quite loud. I tried to close the window, and so AES appears to be safe. I don't know what the guideline is on AES, but personally, I would go for AES 256 to improve security. And if you are using encryption with Business Central, apparently there is an RSA implementation in the cryptography code unit. On the symmetric crypto, there's Raindoll. It looks like Rigendell, but it's pronounced Raindoll. It is unfortunate that is chosen. That should not have been used. It should have been AES. Technically, the implementation is effectively the same, but Raindoll is not FIPS approved algorithm. So if you need to be FIPS 140 compliant and you use Raindoll, you are not FIPS 140 compliant. So just a heads up. I know the backstory of why Raindoll was chosen. I believe it was a mistake. I believe that Microsoft messed up by approving that submission. And we're kind of stuck with it. So I've spoken to a couple people about re-implementing that properly with AES, but it's a lot of work. So I just haven't done it. Okay, Q&A. I got to go. Thank you for joining, but thanks everyone for joining in the chat. And think about scaling complexity within your organization and how you deal with that. So, adios. I am out of here, and have a good weekend.